dear viewer, good evening and welcome to Current Issue. With me tonight, the U.S. Attorney for the State of Michigan, Barbara McQuade. Barbara, welcome again to MEA TV.
Thank you, Wally.
Thank you. Barbara, there's a lot of things happening and I know your office has been busy with many different crimes, if it's social crime or medical or, Tell me, the situation, especially in Detroit with the cut and all that, and we know the prosecutor laid off some people and all that. How that affect the operation and the function of the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Well, budget cuts are very difficult. The federal government has been under this sequester where there's been mandatory budget cuts, and so all of us have been feeling that pinch, and all of us are down some manpower, but we have done all that we can to make sure that we're focusing on our priorities. We have tried to make our pitch to Congress about that it's not only costing public safety, but cost the bottom line, because offices like ours at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we actually make more money than we spend because
but still there is a cut.
Yes, but there's still cuts. So it's sort of penny wise and pound foolish, because in the fraud cases that we prosecute and the civil cases, we get judgments and restitution back for victims. So U.S. Attorney's offices across the country earn anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6 times their budget with the recoveries that they make. So it's really kind of a foolish spending model to cut our budgets.
Yeah, you know what? You bring another question to me. When you have convicted somebody, if it's drugs or stealing merchandise or even money judgment against them, where that money goes? Where the merchandise and all that goes?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. If there's a case with a real victim, say an investor who had his money invested fraudulently and someone lost it, the judge will order what's called restitution, and that means the defendant has to pay the money back to the victim. Now, sometimes the money is gone, but we can get garnishment and other things to require them to pay them back into the future. So when there's a real victim, the victim gets paid first. Then there are also fines, and that money goes to the federal government. And then also sometimes the victim is the government itself, Medicare fraud or other federal program frauds, and those recoveries go back to the federal government. So back to the taxpayers at the end of the day.
I see. How about if there is a merchandise, like drug dealer, you got him and he's got his house, he's got his cars and,
Yes, so those items are often forfeited. The government will take those, and then usually what happens is the U.S. Marshal Service sells them at an auction. So people can buy them at a fairly reduced rate.
That's good opportunity
cars and houses and things. But again, that money, goes back into law enforcement. Some of that gets shared with our task force partners, local police departments, and others. So it goes back to law enforcement expenses.
I see. In the past year, do you see increase in crime or decrease? And which crime it's more decrease and which crime in general more decrease in the state of Michigan in general,
Well, our violent crime rate, unfortunately, has been pretty steady and at a pretty high level in some of our big cities: Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, Saginaw. Very high crime rates. I think it goes hand in hand with unemployment. Look at all 4 of those cities. You see very high rates of unemployment. So quite a bit of violent crime. We tried to do some things to stem the tide there, to try to reduce violent crime. We work very collaboratively with the state and local police departments and the local prosecutors, and trying to do all we can to reduce the homicide rates and violent crime rates in those cities, so that we can create a safe space where people want to come and live and invest and do business. So steady, but not decreasing, which I think is not a good story. The other crime we have seen, I think, increase in recent years is Medicare fraud, healthcare fraud. It is a problem. It's hard to know how much the crime rate has gone up and how much we're just detecting it more now. We have developed certainly more sophisticated methods for detecting Medicare fraud using data. When you see doctors who are billing, for example,
like that Dr. Farid, for example,
Yes, a doctor recently charged with Medicare fraud for misdiagnosing patients with cancer and providing chemotherapy treatments for patients who did not need it, as alleged in an indictment. We've had examples of psychotherapists who bill for more than 24 hours in one day. And so using data, you can collect those red flags, and that helps us initiate investigations. So we've had quite a bit of Medicare fraud related cases in recent years, and I think part of that is just because we've become a little better at detecting it.
I see. Do you think they hit more the old people? That usually the old people, they have some kind of a problem, if it's like his legs or his stomach, or and he go to a doctor. And honestly, I heard there are some doctor, even they pay those patients and they take him to the office, and they even give him some benefit just to hire the doctor. And I'm pretty sure those people, they don't know what the doctor is going to put and what he's going to charge and all that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we urge patients to do if you are a Medicare recipient is to read your statement carefully.
But old people, they don't,
Well, so we urge them to do that, or to ask a family member to assist them or to do that for them, and make sure that everything that's listed on there is really a service that they received. That is, as you point out, a very common practice where a doctor may be legitimately treating a patient for one thing and then add on some other things, that that they provided a home health visit that they didn't provide, or that they received some durable medical equipment like a wheelchair or oxygen that they did not receive.
Or they give them a used one and they charge you for the new one,
and
for
some
example.
of those things, the patient may not be able to detect. But if they notice things like that, there is a website, stopfraud.gov, that tells you the resources, what you can do if you believe that you are being exploited for Medicare fraud.
So that website, somebody could go and file a complaint,
Yes. Yes,
Yeah?
stopfraud.gov.
I see.
Yep.
What other crime that you think it's increasing? Social crime, as you mentioned, because of the economy and all that increase. What other crime increase?
Well, of course, one problem that we have always seen is prevalent, and I don't know if it's gone up, but we have quite a bit of public corruption. Unfortunately, we've you try to do all you can to end these cases and hope that you send a deterrent message to let people know that you're watching. We've made public corruption a very high priority, but it continues. We still see it in lots of communities, city and suburb, federal, state, and local, all levels of government. But we are really deeply committed to ending that. When you think about all the great public servants who work in our community, the vast majority of them are very honorable and work very hard.
Absolutely,
and so to me, it makes it really important to root out those who are abusing those positions of trust. And so we've seen those cases, and we continue to prosecute them aggressively.
As a Middle Eastern American community, do you see increase or decrease in civil rights crime? How the situation? Or do you think you're receiving all the complaint, that there is a lot of there, but they don't complain, you don't know about it?
Yeah, you never know if you're reaching everybody. We try to do quite a bit of outreach in the community so that people
you
feel...
did a great job for that.
Thank you, but we can never do enough, and you never know who you're not reaching. We try to reach kids in schools, we try to reach people in the community to let them know that we're here to serve you, and we want to make sure that all of the people living in Michigan, including immigrant communities, are enjoying the full laws, rights, responsibilities that our Constitution and laws provide. And when someone is victimized by a hate crime or discrimination, we want to know about it, and we'll bring those cases. I have not seen an increase in those, but some of those crimes do go unreported, so it's difficult to know what the level is like. Certainly right after the attacks of 9/11, we saw a spike in these backlash threats and hoaxes and things like that. It seems like that has leveled off a little bit, but I think we always have to be vigilant and make sure that we're protecting the rights of all of the people who live in our great community. Michigan, I think, as our governor has said, we should be a beacon for people from around the world. We want more population here.
We are the melting pot of all the ethnic minorities.
We want them all here. And so if we want to encourage people to come here, we need to let people know that their rights are going to be protected here. So we've worked very hard to do that.
I know you don't get involved in politics and all that, but what people hear about the terrorist action by Muslims in all over the world, and there are certain group, they so radicals, they doing all the killing, all the miserable crimes and all that. Do you think that will affect the community at large, seeing the Middle Eastern community are they the same people who's committing all those miserable crimes? Of course they're not, and the Muslim faith against this. And I brought so many religion people from both sides, and they told me both they are the worst people, and they are against this 100%. But do you think it's reflecting in the community at large?
I don't know, and I think that's why we have to work very hard to make sure people are educated and
Yes.
understand what Islam says and doesn't say, because I think
Yes.
sometimes people fall prey to that false narrative that, you know, America's at war with Islam, which is absolutely false. You know, I think President Obama has worked very hard to say we're all part of the American family.
Absolutely.
We're a nation founded on religious freedom, and we welcome all religions here. But I do think that there are people in America and everywhere who stereotype, who assume that because one group of Muslims committed acts of terrorism, they paint with a broad
and my
brush.
neighbor, he's a Muslim, so
Which is really
you know,
foolish. You know, the
Yeah.
example I often bring up is,
Yeah.
you know, after the attacks at Oklahoma City in 1995,
Yes.
committed by Timothy McVeigh,
Yes.
we didn't go out and blame all Catholics, all Irish,
not, yeah.
for acts of terrorism.
Yeah.
So why on earth would we assume that all Muslims have the same philosophy as the men who attacked at 9/11? It's really very foolish and naive to make that assumption. But still, I think it's our job to go out and make sure people understand that. One of the things we do is do some training on countering violent extremism and show that violent extremists take all forms. There have been certainly Muslim terrorists, but there have also been white supremacist groups.
Absolutely, yeah.
There are these sovereign citizen groups. There are militia groups. There are a variety of different people who engage in, you know, all kinds of acts of violence. And if we focus only on one group, number one, we're not going to keep ourselves safe, because that's not a smart way to protect ourselves. And number two, that is really counter to what America is all about, which is people being judged on who they are as individuals.
Absolutely. You know I see Barbara McQuade in every event I go, and I go to a lot of events. Barbara McQuade, she's there talking to people, trying to understand their issue, working with their issue, and open your door honestly to all those organizations and individuals who have some concern and some issue. And we appreciate that a lot from you. But let's talk, there is a committee called a Bridge. And it's, you know, I don't want to talk too much about it because you are one of the co-chairmen, to build bridges between the federal agencies and the organization and community. Tell us more about it, please.
Well, it's a wonderful idea. It started shortly
When it
after
started?
9/11.
Okay.
The head of the FBI at that time was a man named John Bell.
Yes.
And he knew Imad Hamad, who was the director of the
ADC.
ADC,
Yes.
American Arab Anti-Discrimination
Yes.
Committee. And they correctly perceived that there would be backlash against the Middle Eastern community as a result of the 9/11 attack. So he said, let's get a group together, government and community, and start having a conversation, because we want to understand, we want to give people a forum for answering questions.
Okay.
We want to be able to do some outreach. So that group began, and I tell you, they had a very early success, because one of the directives from the Attorney General at that time was that a number of Middle Eastern men were to be interviewed by the FBI.
Correct.
Many perceived that as a very intimidating situation. And in many cities across the country, the success rate was very low, because they would knock on doors, say, FBI, I'm here to talk to you, and people had the right to and did decline. The Bridges group decided that they wanted to do it in a friendlier way. This was not because people were suspected of committing crimes, but because they were hoping to obtain information.
Yes.
And so
And
they
that's
wanted,
more important, because you can avoid a lot of crime.
right, and so if you have a more comfortable setting, and if you can
Yes.
alleviate some of the fears, you might encourage more people to come. So instead of knocking on doors, through the Bridges group, they decided to send out letters to the people they wanted to interview. They explained what the process was about.
True.
They offered them, you can call to make an appointment. If you want to, you can even bring a lawyer.
Yes.
And as a result, the success rate in Detroit was higher than anywhere across the country, because people came in and wanted to be patriotic and wanted to share information and did not feel intimidated. So just the way it was done, by getting that community input and that suggestion about how to do it, made law enforcement more effective. So that was one of the great early successes of Bridges.
Good. Any other thing, and is it open to all the federal agencies, or local and state, or is just certain federal agency and certain group, and from the community? Is it open just a civil right organization or all the organizations?
We want everybody to be
Good.
there. You know, to me, the goal of Bridges, we meet quarterly.
Okay.
We try to move the meeting location around so that
Yes.
different people have an opportunity to attend. But the goal is to get as many people from Muslim and Arab Middle Eastern community together as possible,
Yes.
and also to bring as many officials from law enforcement, federal, state, local, as possible, we try to have an agenda so that there's some order to our conversation. We meet for about an hour and a half.
Sure.
But there's so many issues that people are interested in. You know, what's the FBI doing with surveillance in mosques, for example?
Sure.
Changes in the immigration laws is often a topic that people want to talk about. Border search authority. What are my rights when I come to the border and I'm, you know, asked whether it's at the airport or at the land border with Canada?
Yes.
So we try to have the right officials there to answer those questions and to explain the law. But I'll tell you, it's a very two-sided forum, because not only is the government providing information to people,
Yes.
but by listening to concerns of the community, I think the law enforcement officials can understand some of the sensitivities, and as a result, like that interview project we talked about before, can sometimes modify some of the things we're doing. So, you know, we're still doing what we need to do, but doing it in a way that might be more effective and a little more sensitive to the needs of the community.
Sure. The no-flight list, I hear a lot about it and all that. Do you want to discuss that,
Sure.
or do you have information? Can you tell us more? Because there is a lot of people complain. You know, they go into the airport and he is ready to go and all that, and right at the checkpoint, no, you cannot fly.
Yes.
Or people go in, what I understand, that's even worse. People go into the Middle East or anywhere in the Arab world, and when they come back, no, you cannot fly back to the United States, and he's a U.S. citizen. Tell us more,
It's
please.
a concern we certainly hear about frequently. We had a Bridges meeting on this topic earlier this year to address some of those questions, and brought in someone who works for the FBI in Washington, D.C. on the no-fly list. And it was very interesting. And she talked about how every day people are added to the list and removed from the list. But what happens sometimes is people with an identical name end up on the list. And so you show up at the airport, your name is Ali Bazi, and you want to fly to the Middle East, and they say Ali Bazi's on the list.
There is 100 Ali Bazi.
There are. Now, usually, if you're an innocent Ali Bazi, you will be cleared pretty quickly, because they also have other things like date of birth, place of birth, and other identifiers that you can fairly quickly show, you know, with your passport or some other document, that you're a different Ali Bazi. So they can work through those issues. But unfortunately, the reality is that there are those duplications of names, and you may have other commonalities that causes problems. So it's not a perfect system. They do their best to try to prevent people who are truly a danger to the flying public from getting on planes. But as a result, sometimes, you know, the list is a little over-inclusive. There is a process for redress if you are on the list incorrectly. The Department of Homeland Security maintains that they have an Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties.
Exactly.
And their website, I don't know the precise URL, but if you go to the Department of Homeland Security's website, their Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties actually has a process for redress if you believe you're incorrectly on the no-fly list to get you off. And I'll tell you what else. If you think you're on the list, you can always call me, and I will help people work their way through the process and just direct them to the right place.
That'd be great, because honestly, I hear that a lot.
Yep.
You know.
If there's somebody who's on the list and shouldn't be, if they'll call us, we don't have the power to deal with the list, but we can at least direct you to the right place. Because I understand it can be somewhat intimidating and daunting to think, oh, how am I ever going to get myself off this list in this bureaucratic government? But actually, we can help direct them.
And honestly, what I understand from some people, even some business people from the Middle East, they just encourage to come here because they fear if they go to the airport, and even if they come to the United States, when they're going to go back, their name pop out and give them a lot of hard time and all that. So as a business who can come and invest in the United States, why he need this headache for?
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate, because we want to encourage people to come to the United States, especially to Michigan. And I think the officials working in those positions in Michigan understand that as well. You know, you talk to the people who run TSA in Michigan and the Customs and Border Protection Group in Michigan are very welcoming to immigrants and really want that process to work as effectively as possible. And so they respect the rights of people to come and go, and they want to make that process quick and efficient. And so again, if there are problems, if individuals have problems, we want to know about it and we want to solve it.
And we had Chris Perry here, and he mentioned we're trying our best to do that. But if he's on the list and the list comes from Washington, we have to abide by it, and we have to do our job and all that. You know what? Lately, in the past year or so, a lot of banks close Middle Eastern account just because they are Middle Eastern, and given no answer and all that. How your office could play the role of, I mean, isn't it that against their civil right? Because they are Middle Eastern, they're closing their account, or they stopping their line of credit because he's a Middle Eastern.
Yeah, I have heard that issue, and we have
Yeah.
tried to make some inquiries on behalf of people. If
Yeah.
they're being dealt with solely because they are Middle Eastern, I agree with you that would be a problem. We have tried to assist some of those individuals in the past. What the banks, I think, would tell you is that there are additional facts, perhaps not known to others, that are causing them to make those decisions. And so the bank is probably not at liberty to say what those are,
Yeah.
but they've gotten directives that those accounts have been tied to illegal activity, and that's
But
why
if
they're
it's
closing.
suddenly happening to a lot of people, I mean, 1, 2, 10, 20, it's okay. But what I understand from the Arab American Civil Rights League,
Yes.
which is I serve in their board too.
Yes,
That there is a lot of complaint coming to the organization that they closing their account with no reason and given no reason. Or in a small business, they depend on line of credit a lot, because a lot of them they pay and then they get the money, for no reason.
Yeah, we have talked with the Arab American Civil Rights League about that issue and have tried to get enough information to try to intervene. Unfortunately, we have not yet been successful in resolving the problem,
I
but
see.
we've been working with them to try to resolve that.
I see. Barbara, what you want from the community? Is there an issue? And especially in this case, the Middle Eastern American community, because and our broadcast cover all the United States, even Canada and Mexico. So give me from your experience as an U.S. attorney, not just in Michigan, but nationwide, what you like to see from the community, how you want him to act, what kind of attitude, what kind of dealing with the public you wanted to see?
Well, what I would love the most is to have members of the Arab and Muslim community come work for the government. We've really tried to work to improve the diversity of our workforce,
Yes.
because I believe that we are stronger and more effective
Yes.
when we reflect the diversity of the community that we serve. I've had some limitations on my ability to hire because of the budget cuts. We've had
Yes.
a hiring freeze.
But do
in
you
place.
have some?
We do. Since
Good.
January of 2011,
Yeah.
we've had a hiring freeze. But we did hire a Chaldean attorney. We hired a Muslim attorney.
Excellent.
And it absolutely enhances our ability to be effective prosecutors. When you're sitting around the table and you're talking about an indictment decision, it's very useful to have someone at the table to reflect those diversities of opinion that's going to be on a jury.
Sure.
And it might see the case differently than you do. It's very useful to have someone say, wait a minute, in my country where I grew up, just because you don't make eye contact with a government official does not mean that you should be suspicious. It might be a sign of respect.
Yeah.
Didn't think about that.
Culture.
Or someone saying,
many things in
where
culture,
I grew up, just
Yeah.
because you run from the police doesn't mean you're guilty of a crime. So having all those diverse views
Yeah.
makes us better. And so I think that cuts across all aspects of government, border officials, high-level officials, decision makers. Don't we want to have Arabs and Muslims in those jobs who can reflect those sensitivities
Yes.
and in decision-making, provide better information so that we get better decisions? So my request would be to consider careers
Good.
in government so that our government can be better.
Absolutely. A lot of, I heard a lot of children, when a police officer or in any case, when they ask them questions, they look at the parents. And right there, the police officer, why he's doing that.
Yes,
But that's culture.
Yes,
This is how it is.
Right, and again, so if you have a police officer who is from the same background, at least one of the members of the squad can explain that.
Sure. Do you have an education in your office, and do you know about other federal agencies' office that they have some kind of educational program to their officer, to their worker? Not just the Middle Eastern, the African American, the Asian, the Sikh, and all that. Do you have that within your office?
Yes, we do,
Yeah.
and we try to make sure we have a good understanding of all the cultures that we serve. As you say, you're more effective when you can understand the cultural backgrounds of everyone. But we do. We have an Arab American Heritage Month at the office where we have programs to help people understand. And we've also done some training on cultural issues, religious issues, just to help us to understand the community that we serve.
Well, Barbara, thank you very much for coming here. Thank you for the service you've given to the community. And honestly, I cannot thank you much on behalf of the community for your involvement with the community. It makes a huge difference. I've been here for 41 years. Yes, before you, He was a little bit involved too, but before that, there was no involvement from any federal agency with the community. Thanks God, today I see whatever event I go, I see you and the other from federal agency with the community, working with the community, talking to the community, understanding their issue, and that building bridges between you and the community made a huge difference. And that's why we see the relation between the community and federal agency and your office is smooth and business as usual.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's very important, and I will tell you, the community always treats me wonderfully. It's a wonderful relationship, so
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you again for coming.
Okay.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Dear reviewer, that was my interview with Barbara McQuade from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Honestly, as I mentioned, she's everywhere in the community. She's working with the community, understanding their issue. And I ask the community and their organization to work with her office and to build that bridge. She's trying, but we got to try ourselves to build that bridges so we could benefit not just her office, but the community too. Thanks for watching and good night.